Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Ben the Boat Painter, a relaxing look at life on the canals as we paint two 48-foot narrowboats. I've left our boats around the corner for the moment, just come out for an early morning stroll because it's quite busy where we're moored up right now with the rowing club and the train line. So I've come to clear my head and consider what we need to do this episode. We've already started undercoating the back hatch, the back deck and the roof, and we need to start thinking about getting these areas as smooth as possible for when we apply our first layer of gloss top coat, because the shininess of the top coat is going to show up any imperfections in the surface far more than the undercoat does. The undercoat's not that shiny, so it can be a bit deceptive sometimes. You'll undercoat something, think it looks really good, and then you put your first layer of top coat on and all of a sudden it looks far bumpier and rougher than you thought it was. So we need to get it as smooth as possible, and with each subsequent layer of undercoat we'll then sand it back, and each time we do that, that surface is going to get smoother and smoother. So hopefully by the fourth layer of undercoat, say, we'll have something that's ready to paint with the top coat. And to be honest, we're not going to get anything done out here, are we? So I think it's time to retrace our steps, and I'll see you back at the boat in a few moments. So back at the boat once again, and time to turn our attention to this rather rough area and get it as smooth as possible. And as I'm looking at it, I'm wondering if it would have been better if we stripped the paint off completely as we did with the deck and the hatch. But as we saw with the hatch, it's not actually a guarantee that we're going to get a completely smooth surface, so we're going to just continue on and do some filling. I mean, in particular, even if we had stripped the paint, there's this area here. We can see that there are these extremely deep scratches, grinder marks, which have perhaps gone even into the very surface of the metal. So even if we had stripped all the paint off, we still would have had to apply our filler to get the smooth surface we want, even if we'd stripped all the paint off. We've got our work cut out, I think, because there's a lot of imperfections to deal with, but it's quite a small area, so I think we can concentrate, take our time, and get it looking really, really nice without it taking too long. So on that note, let's get cracking. And away we go. Using the same technique as we did earlier on the roof, we don't have to worry about the direction in which we apply the filler because we're going to be sanding it down afterwards. And once we've gone round and applied the filler to all the imperfections we can see, we're then going to go around the whole area again and repeat the process just to make sure everything's as smooth as possible. And technically speaking, we want to almost apply too much filler because we're going to sand it back down to achieve that smooth surface. And now, this is exciting, we're handing over live to the filler cam. I believe this is a world first. My partner's nephew bought one of these head-mounted action cameras recently. He's been filming himself skydiving, and I've filmed myself going to the shops and doing some filling. And we can see here now that we've completed our 2 layers of filler, and we're now sanding it down. As you can see, I'm being careful about the direction that I'm sanding, and it's going to match up with the direction that I'm going to be painting it afterwards. So here we are, finishing off the sanding. Now we're now even more excited. This is the sand can. This is hot. You will notice I am being very strict about the direction in which I work. I'm going to be using an 80 grit sandpaper, so quite rough, because we actually really want to remove material. We want to sand the filler right back until it's totally smooth. And so here we are, just finishing off our sanding. Last little bit down the edge there. And I think we're good to go. Here we are, perched on the end of the rowing boat, admiring our handiwork. And at first glance, it may look like we've taken a big step backwards, because as before, we had a very nice even colour. Now it's anything but. However, in terms of the smoothness of the surface, this is a huge step forward. And although it may not be perfect yet, we'll have a better idea of how well we've done when we put on our next coat of undercoat. And oh, well look, there's a moorhen over there preening itself. So why don't we continue undercoating the back deck area? But before that, I think it would be wise to first complete the sanding we still need to do on the back hatch and the roof, because we don't want the dust from those areas to contaminate any new paint we put on here. And in fact, in addition to that, I was thinking, why don't we also start the back doors? Because if we finish the deck, hatch and the roof, these back doors are going to look really shabby. So if we start on these and complete these two, the whole area of the back of the boat is going to look really, really nice. So we'll add that to our list of things to do, but for now, I'll see you up at the back hatch. So away we go. We're going to first focus our attention on the corner areas, because if you remember, there were these kind of ugly areas of filler, which you can actually just see in the corner there, the marks, just after I've sanded it there. So I want to sand it back as much as possible without exposing any bare metal, because I really want to get these corners as smooth as we can. Perhaps we have to accept that we're not going to get it 100% smooth, but we're going to do what we can. I mean, we could keep going with filler and do another round of filler on the hatch, but there comes a point where you just have to accept you're not going to get it perfect. And we can see more clearly here there's areas of primer and filler that we've exposed. And we're using quite a rough sandpaper here, 80 grit on the corners. And then in the central sections, as we're doing here, we're going to be using like a 120 grit, so it's not quite as coarse, because we want to avoid getting deep sanding marks in the main body of the hatch. So in the corners of the hatch, we're more concerned about smoothing the surface off. But in the main area of the hatch, as we're sanding, we're more concerned about creating a good mechanical bond for our next coat of undercoat. We'll also go over those corner areas again with the 120, because we were using such a rough grade of sandpaper in the corners, we will have created some deep sanding marks.
Well, here we are on a new spot. Still in Broxbourne technically, I'd say, but just round the corner, which is far enough to constitute a legitimate move in order to keep us complying with the terms of our continuous cruisers license agreement. Now, as promised, let's have a look at the back hatch. And as you can see, it's looking very nice. But we have these corner sections. Have a look at these corner sections. You can see they're not a consistent colour, because we've sanded it right back, even back past the primer to the filler in some cases, which is okay because we haven't exposed any bare metal. Difficult to tell just by looking at it how smooth it is, but if I run my hand across, that does feel very smooth. There is a couple of little bits perhaps that aren't perfect. So, although we have a nice smooth surface to paint on, we're not quite ready for our first layer of top coat. One of the reasons we put undercoat on is to achieve this nice, smooth, even colour, which we don't quite have in the corners yet. Remember, top coat is a little bit more transparent than undercoat, so before we put on our top coat, we want to make sure that everything is completely the same colour, and that's going to help us get that beautiful professional finish we're after. Generally speaking, it's probably going to be too hot to paint today, but if we act quickly, I think we can just about get away with it now, because we've got some shade from these trees over here, so that's going to help us. We've also got the shade of this tree behind me, which is actually going to help us with our undercoat to give us some shade. But if we were doing top coat, I probably wouldn't want to apply that so close to the tree, because we might get some sort of particles and leaves and bits and bobs falling off it, which is going to spoil the finish. But if it's for the undercoat, it'll be fine. The undercoat dries a lot quicker than the top coat to start, and even if anything does drop off the tree onto the paint, we'll have enough of an opportunity to sand it smooth by the time we put on our final layer of top coat. So I think we better get started before the sun comes up.
Okay, on we go with our fourth and final coat of undercoat. We could keep going and add more and more coats, which would add protection, obviously. Perhaps gives a smoother finish as well, but you've got to stop somewhere. We can't keep going forever. We can see that in the left hand side of the hatch, those inconsistently coloured corner sections have been painted over adequately. We do have some little streaks there on the sort of bottom left of the hatch. Perhaps that's maybe caused by the thinner. Also perhaps the undercoat hasn't been mixed entirely thoroughly, but this is perfectly fine for our last coat of undercoat. There we go, very nice. And while we've got the undercoat out, why don't we turn our attention to the back deck? And again, in terms of protection, we really want to add a decent number of layers of undercoat here, because we're going to be stepping on and off this section of the boat almost every day. I mean, we're going to save a little bit for the front deck, but we might do 4 or 5 coats of undercoat on the back deck here, just for the added protection. Switching back to our pink undercoat in readiness for our nice deep red back deck border section. Very important to get in all the nooks and crannies, especially around the hinges. Trouble is with painting the hinges that as you open the back deck, invariably it's going to scrape some of the paint off, but no excuse not to paint it, of course. And now we're being quite careful. At this stage we don't want to splat any pink undercoat on the grey section. Keep it nice and neat. Always feels a little bit easier painting undercoat than the top coat, which we haven't got to yet. I wonder if we're going to do any next week. Yeah, we probably are actually. Probably are. But because the undercoat is not as shiny as the top coat, it's if we don't paint entirely perfectly, our little mistakes are not really going to show up with the undercoat. And of course, if we do make any mistakes with the undercoat, we've got more of an opportunity to fix them, because we'll have, well, on top of this, if this is our last coat of undercoat, we'll have at least 4 coats on top of this, so plenty of opportunity to sand back any mistakes. Boy oh boy, it's hot. Too hot for painting, too hot for working, to be fair, but we're going to soldier on and do some sanding nonetheless. We're just going to sort out this very rough area first, concentrate on this for a bit, and then go over the whole roof with some 80 grit, and hopefully we won't faint in the process. Alright, let's give it a go, come on. Okay, it really does feel too hot to work really, but we've got to keep going with it. We've got to keep going. It's not going to sand itself, is it? Now, this section here, I'm slightly aware that I'm perhaps not doing this as good as it could possibly be done. I think the main reason is I did have this little device. It was kind of like a sort of a sanding board that you strap a larger piece of sandpaper to. It has a kind of handle on it, and it enables us to kind of sand in a flatter finish than with this smaller piece of sandpaper. And I'm making sure I sand these sections quite smooth as well, because hopefully the water that runs off the side of the roof is going to run down those channels at the edges of the roof. So I want them to be as smooth as possible to allow the water to run off. And for the rest of the roof, it's just a question of knuckling down, just keeping going till it's finished really. I mean, it is good for the old cardiovascular system, I've got to say. You've got to strike the balance though, this is the thing. It's good exercise this, but of course you run the risk of getting that repetitive strain injury, which, to be fair, I have got. You know, my right shoulder does twinge a little bit. And as we progress, I am just, there we go, I'm using my left arm there, so it's good to get a bit ambidextrous, just to kind of spread the load on your body. And boy oh boy, am I happy to finish that. That is hot. Well, here we are once again on the back deck of Scarlet, wondering what to do next. Well, we've just finished sanding the roof, so in an ideal world, we'd put a coat of paint on the roof to take advantage of the fact we've got a nice, clean, dust-free surface to work on. But it is far too hot for that at the moment, and I have taken shelter under this fortuitously placed bush, and it gives us an opportunity to do something on the back deck area. And oh look, there's some baby coots over there. Look at that. Isn't that nice? When I was little, I couldn't understand how they could be so brightly coloured when they're young, but when they grow up, they just turn out black and white. I mean, where's the logic in that? There is none, basically. Anyway, where were we? Oh yeah, we were painting a boat, weren't we? Right, so far on this area, we've been concentrating just on the upward facing surfaces, the back deck and the board around it, also the tiller arm as well. And we want to get going on this because if we finish the back deck area completely and then start this, we risk damaging our, our hard work getting a nice shiny top coat, because we'll be crawling around on top of it, bits of dust will be falling down, we might drip paint on it as well. So really we want to finish this and this roughly the same time. So yeah, obviously we need to get going on this because we haven't started it yet. It's our first vertical face that we're painting. So, I mean, we sand it in the same way as we've done the roof and the deck here, but because we're trying to achieve a bit more of a refined kind of finesse finish, we want to be a bit more careful about how we sand it. So when we were doing the roof, we were sort of sanding horizontal and vertical, but here we really strictly want to just be sanding vertically. And we want nice even brush strokes going up and down, so everything needs to be vertical, sanding and brush strokes. So enough chat. I think we better get on with it, otherwise yeah, it's going to get dark. Okay, off we go, sanding on and around the back door area. And as you can see, as always, we're sanding in the same direction that we'll be moving our paintbrush when we come to paint it, so in this case vertically. And the only other thing we need to think about while sanding is when we come up against these little fitments, we've got the doorbell in my left hand there, we want to get sand up right up to the edge of it, otherwise the paint's going to peel off around these fitments if we don't sand right to the edge. But at the same time, you can see I'm sanding horizontally there, but we really want to keep that area that we've sanded horizontally as small as possible, because it will show up. And well, what else can we say about this? In fact, it's so hot here. Sometimes working in the heat it's kind of futile, really. Because one tactic I used to do and still do is, if it's a really hot day, just get up really early, and you can start work at like 6 o'clock in the morning, work till 10 o'clock, for example, take the middle of the day off, and then perhaps work sort of 4 till 8 in the evening if you can, and then you've done a full day's work, but you've just had the whole middle of the day free as well. So I really do like these long summer days, but the heat can be a little bit exhausting, I must say. Okay, pretty happy with that. Not 100% smooth yet, but obviously with every layer of undercoat we add, it's going to get smoother and smoother. Tempted to put my first layer of undercoat on now, to be honest, but I mean, the ambient temperature is the same as the roof, but the surface temperature, this would be fine because of the shade of the tree there. But we did expose some areas of rust, only a couple, so we do need to put our rust treatment down before we put any undercoat on. So better get on with it. Okay, on we go with our rust converter, our rust treatment solution. And what is actually happening while we're applying this mysterious milky liquid onto the rusty parts of our boat? Well, it has an active ingredient, either tannic acid or phosphoric acid. And this acid reacts with the rust, or to give it its posh scientific name, iron oxide. And this chemical reaction causes the iron oxide to convert to iron phosphate, which is what's happening. When we see it going darker, as I move my brush away, we're going to speed up the process. We'll see the white of the rust converter go dark, so that means the chemical reaction is working properly. And I think we're going to look at this in more detail, though, as the video series rolls on, because even though I've just explained it to you, I'm still not exactly sure what's happening. But what we need to think about now is what we're going to do tomorrow morning. So, what should we do first? Well, I think the logical thing to do would be to put our third coat of undercoat on the roof. It's been sanded down for a little while now. We didn't get a chance to paint it as soon as we sanded it because I had to go away for a couple of days. So before any birds get a chance to poo on it or more dust gets a chance to accumulate on the surface, we should just give it a little wipe down with our tack cloth to make sure it's nice and clean and get painting. Now, it's probably worth having a little look at this tack cloth we've just used. We had already swept the roof and got rid of as much dust as we could with a brush. But have a little look at this. Even though we think we may have got rid of all the dust off the roof with a brush, that's not actually the case. This is what a nice fresh tack cloth looks like. But even after we've swept the roof, when we've wiped the roof with a tack cloth, this is how much dust that it's picked up. So this goes to show just how important these little things are. Very valuable piece of kit. And away we go with undercoat layer number 3. And at this stage, our main aim is to add protection to the roof here. With each coat of undercoat, it will be getting smoother and smoother, but the main aim is to really add as much protection as we can. being an upward facing surface, it's much more exposed to the elements than other parts of the boat. In addition to that, we often want to keep things on the roof, so if we're kind of scraping them around, it's going to give it that little bit of extra protection and prevent the paint from exposing bare metal when we move stuff around on the roof. And we can see here that technique of applying the fresh paint just next to the existing paint with a little gap, and then working it in to the existing paint. It seems rather high up here, actually. It's funny that sometimes people ask me, can I paint their boat while it's out of the water and lying on a hard standing on dry land, thinking that it would be easier for me. But actually, if you think about it, if I'm standing on the roof and the boat is lying on dry land, that's quite a big drop, you know. So if I fell off the roof, that would be catastrophic. So it's much more safe. I feel much safer painting in the water, and it's nice to paint over that ugly filled area once and for all. You can see that technique again there from that view. We've got another layer of undercoat after this, but I didn't film that actually because I thought it would just be exactly the same as the third coat. But funnily enough, something interesting did happen, which we're about to find out. And you can see here we've finally run out of room, painted ourselves into a corner, and we're finishing off the coat perched on the side of the front deck.
Now we have a bit of an interesting situation here. I was just applying the fourth coat of undercoat to the roof, and I've got exactly halfway through and it started raining. Now, what do we do in this situation, and what damage has been caused? Well, in terms of the damage, surprisingly little. Have a little look at this. So as you can see, the raindrops have left a little impression on the wet paint, although it's barely detectable, to be honest. I mean, from here, I can see it, but it's not obvious. So to get those shots, I've had to go in with like a spotlight to the side and use a magnifying glass to actually show it clearly. So you really can't see it. And if I move just 1 foot down, there's no evidence of any damage at all. So if it's raining while you're painting, it's not necessarily as bad as you might think. However, this is undercoat, which dries very quickly, and there's a very low risk that rain would damage undercoat significantly, unless it's, you know, very, very hard rain. But if it was forecast for hard rain, you know, we certainly wouldn't be painting. So what do we do if we're painting and it starts raining in order to limit the damage caused by the rain? Well, the first thing, obviously, is to stop. You're not going to achieve anything by carrying on while it's raining. But when you stop, try and just smooth off the edge of the wet paint so it's not too obvious. So when we start painting again, we're not left with a very obvious kind of mark where we stopped and started. Second thing to do would be just to hang around and try and smooth off the raindrops that are forming on the wet paint. It's a bit easy with the roller, because when you roller over wet paint, it causes less of a mark on the paint that's not dry yet. With brushing, it's a little bit different, because the brush can actually spoil the smooth surface of the wet paint. So we were lucky here that we were rollering, and by doing that, we've stopped the sort of raindrop damage that we do have from being over a larger area. The other thing to do would be to get rid of any water that's accumulated on the surface that you've been painting. Although it looks like there's no damage now, if we let all this water stay here for hours, we may come back and find that it has actually damaged it. So even though it's still raining, it's a good idea to try and get rid of it if we can. Well, I had hoped we'd be able to finish the roof today, but it's still raining and it's getting a bit late now, so that's not going to happen. So let's go back inside, shall we? Okay, so here we are inside, sheltering from the rain. It's not raining too hard, to be fair, but it's wet enough to stop us working. So what we're going to do for the rest of the episode, we've got a few minutes left. And you know what, this week I think we're going to break with tradition. We're not going to end with a little nature section. We're going to have a bit of a look at some of my favourite boats that I've painted over the last 10 years and just have a little chat about what's special about them. You know, they've all got their sort of unique properties and why each one is I think is particularly good, you know.
In episode 1 we did have a little sneak preview of some of them, but this time we're going to go in a little bit more detail. I think over the winter months, as I'm not going to be able to paint stuff outside, so we're going to have to find things to do inside. We're going to perhaps take a few of these and go into much more detail. Have a look at, you know, a sort of a larger set of photographs for each boat. But for now, we'll just have a little kind of top 10 countdown of my 10 favourite boats. Okay, so let's have a little look at the first one. This one's called Summer Breeze, and I've chosen this one because it's a shame I haven't got pictures of what it looked like before, because this is probably the most dramatic before and after impact that the paint job had that I've ever done, I think. But before, the boat was, well, it was kind of black, covered in rust. Not too bad, but it was a black, rusty boat. And now it pretty much looks brand new. So I just love the simplicity as well, the fact that it's white in colour. Really good idea, in fact, because the white colour, as I've mentioned on various occasions during this series, that the white is very, very good at hiding imperfections. Yeah, this worked out very well, this one, very well. The next one is called Shosholoza. Why have I picked this one? Well, I think this was one of those very fortuitous times where the boat in question didn't really need painting. So the outcome of that was that the finished product, after we'd painted it, it really did look, the quality of it looked spectacular. So obviously, if you're painting something, if you've got a really smooth, good condition surface to start off with, I mean, that's almost half the work done for you. So this one turned out very nicely, very nicely. Also, it's got a very unusual deck and roof colour as well, which gives it that kind of individual, bit of a unique look to this one. Yeah, I like this one. The third one is called Cinghiali. I think I've butchered the pronunciation there. Cinghiali, it's probably more like it. It's Italian for wild boar. And I picked this one just because of the artwork on it, actually. I mean, in particular, the tree design at the front. I think usually when we're trying to pick what artwork's going to go on, the best ones usually tend to be some kind of collaboration between the owner and myself. So they picked some, you know, they described what the kind of thing they liked. They had an artwork book with some inspiration and stuff. So I knew pretty much what they wanted, you know, so I had a reasonably clear idea of what it was that they would like. So that helped a lot. And obviously we altered the shape of these trees just to fit the shape of the boat, really. And yeah, no, I really like this one. It was a little bit difficult doing those little yellow flowers on the tree there, but yeah. Anyway, we got there in the end, as we always do. Next one, yes, Juno. Now this is not one of the more spectacular kind of flamboyant, is more the word, looking ones. It's kind of very understated. That's why I like it. It's got kind of sort of a retro, old school feel. Unusual colour. One of the great advantages of using Craftmaster's, well, or the RAL colour chart we looked at in episode 2. And I like the wooden handrails as well, set it off really nicely. So it's got this kind of sort of earthy, autumnal feel to it. Yeah, I really like this one. Yes, the pronunciation again, the Rocinante. This, I'm just looking at the roof on this one because the roof turned out so good on this one. And I think the reason this in particular turned out well is because it was the weather, the temperature. And we're very fortuitous, because if it had been any colder, like any colder at all, it would have been, quite frankly, disastrous, because as we were painting it, we did notice these tiny little patches that were blooming is the word, where the paint doesn't really, the gloss finish disappears because there's too much moisture in the air. So we were just seeing these tiny, tiny little areas, which means we were right up against the kind of threshold of temperature. And the cooler temperature allowed the paint to relax, smooth itself off into this beautiful mirror finish. So yeah, we're really, really chuffed with this one. And the next one, I've got to include this one. I mean, how can I leave this one out? Look at it. I mean, I think the point in my sort of, well, yeah, I'd only been a boat painter for like 2 or 3 years at this point, and the waterways were nowhere near as densely populated as they are now. So sort of a bit more of a struggle to get work in those days. So I just wanted to do something just to kind of grab everyone's attention, you know. So yeah, I think I achieved that, I think. It wasn't my idea, but when the lady that owns this boat come up with the idea, I'm like, yeah, come on, let's do it. Come on, pandas, unicorns, whatever, I'm up for it. So yeah, I don't ask me how long this took. That's all. Yeah, I love this one. Anyway, next one. Next one. Aha, yes, Toodle Pip. Toodle Pip. No, I had to include this one because the owner, the lovely owner of this boat, texted me the other day, and he said someone come up to him and said it was the nicest boat on the entire canal. I mean, how can I not include this one? I mean, the reason for me it stands out is it's the yellow roof. Yellow roof, quite unusual. I mean, I do see the odd yellow roof here and there, but the reason this looks so, I don't know what, the richness of the colour, it's the amount of paint we put on for this one. This is definitely a record. It was definitely over 15 coats. But that's out of necessity with yellow. I mean, I mentioned it, touched on it in episode 2. Yeah, I'm very pleased that you got that feedback because it was, it vindicates the kind of the approach we took on putting so much paint in. Yeah, so that's very good. Toodle Pip, that one's called. Okay, with only 3 left. Only 3 left, so I'm gonna try and leave the best to, well, any one of these 3 could have been the kind of the top spot, if you like. This one's called Kestrel, a little bit more of a traditional look than the other remaining 2. But I think that this one for me, I just like the Kestrel icon on the side. I mean, when I've heard this boat was called Kestrel, I'm saying, look, you've not got a choice. You have to let me paint a Kestrel on the side. So thankfully they did. So yeah, there we are. Very nice looking boat, that one. Yeah. So 2 left, and the second one is called Evoker. And this one, I mean, I could have put this on. I could have chosen this as my favourite one, actually. It was down to the last 2, actually, to be fair. Evoker, I think I like this one because quite unusual colour combination. In fact, I've never seen that colour combo before. The artwork on the front's very cool as well. I like that. But also, in fact, the photographs at the end came out so well. I think we were very lucky. It really didn't rain the entire time we were painting it. So there was no rain marks on it at all by the time it came time to photograph it. And obviously, as you can see, it was just the most gloriously sunny day. So the colours just looked amazing. So we were certainly helped by the sunshine when it came to taking the pictures here. But now, I think this one's always been the one I think I'm most pleased with. Jackrabbit. Why does this one stand out more than the other ones? I think it's perhaps it's the use of the gold paint just elevates it a little bit. I'm very fond of the artwork. I think that came out very nicely. I could maybe have done those circles a little bit better, to be honest, now looking at it now, but okay, it's okay. And also the colour scheme, it's, blue and green. It's not, doesn't sound like an unusual colour scheme when you describe it, but the specific shades were quite unusual. And there's a lot of colours going on as well. There's grey on the roof, green, cream, blue, black, and gold. So a lot more work, all these extra colours, but hopefully you'll agree that it was worth it. So yeah, that's my 10 of my favourite boats that I've painted. Yeah, how about that?